Nay. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, let's move on to ordinances on first reading. 6A.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 38, zoning ordinance so as to rezone property located at 3820, 3834, and 3836 Hickson Pike from R1 residential zone and R4 special zone to C2 convenience commercial zone, subject to certain conditions.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have spoken to the applicant, and he seems to be okay with this, and I'd ask for your support tonight, but I'm going to move to table this ordinance until we have a more definite plan from the applicant.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Seeing no other questions, let's move on now to 6B.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 38, zoning ordinance so as to rezone properties located at 1915 South Greenwood Ave from N1 manufacturing zone to O1 office zone.
Councilman Byrd, any questions? Oh, not here. Okay, seeing none. He missed it. Let's move on to C.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Chattanooga, Tennessee, instituting a 180-day moratorium on the accepting and processing of applications for any new outdoor advertising signs and on the construction and/or installation of outdoor advertising signs, in addition to the conversion of existing signs and poster paper outdoor advertising signs to an electronic advertising or messaging sign within the city.
Councilman Smith.
Chair. Okay, thank you. So in the amount of research that I've been able to do in what is really a short period of time to get up to speed on this, and then looking at the ruling of the Sixth Circuit Court, I'm really not comfortable or even confident that we are protected even with this moratorium, simply because the ruling really does have to do with the language of what defines an on-premise versus off-premise based on the content of the sign, and that was the First Amendment challenge. So this evening, Mr. Chair, if the council would approve, I'm going to move to defer this for 1 week, and by tomorrow I will have some potential language that I would like to introduce as an alternate version or even a completely separate ordinance that actually just redefines off-prem and on-prem to get away from looking at content, which was the issue with the Sixth Circuit Court. And I would like to possibly be able to introduce that next week at the same time this one comes back up. So again, if the council approves, or you, Mr. Chair, if you would, I do plan on offering that deferral this evening and providing some alternate language in hopes that we may be able to move forward with just correcting the issues that the Sixth Circuit Court found with the ordinance to begin with. Sure,
Councilman Smith, we have a couple more comments, but no objections. I have no problem with that. Councilman Ledford, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo my concern and support in the deferral. I had requested questions that were actually transferred into the ordinance in an alternate version. That was not my intent, so I want to make sure that we have the time to understand what we are truly voting on. This has kind of been thrown on us rather quickly to become experts in the sign industry, and I think that we allow ourselves and allow everyone who's in business in Chattanooga to make sure we get this right and we don't do irreparable harm. So I will be supporting that deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Mr. Vice Chairman Henderson.
Mr. Attorney, I believe it's my understanding that in order to get it on next week's agenda, the legislation that Councilman Smith is going to propose needs a co-sponsor as well, correct?
Yes, sir, should.
And I'll be happy to co-sponsor that legislation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so noted we have Councilman Smith and Mr. Vice Chairman Henderson will be sponsoring this legislation. Thank you, gentlemen. Seeing no other lights, the resolutions 7A, B, and C has already been read into record. So with that being said, we will move on to resolution 7D.
A resolution approving the disbursement of special assessments by the city treasurer for the Downtown Central Business Improvement District in compliance with ordinance number 13498.
Seeing no lights, let's move on now to E. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know
Sure.
this, when we discussed this item, there was language change that I had requested, and it looks like it was done, at least the way that it reads here, and I just wanted to confirm with the city attorney that the language in the actual resolution does also mirror this to where we're not approving collections, but it's just approving the disbursement. I know the wording is here. I just want to make sure that that's clear throughout the entire resolution. Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir. It is at least referencing in here, it's authorizing the mayor to enter into a first agreement in the form attached with Lookout Valley for the use of the property. So it's just simply the exercise option to renew on there.
Wrong item, sorry.
Right, no,
I'm sorry.
7D,
D.
7D.
under resolution, D.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I was going back to 7.
Yeah, I was like, what's up?
All right, let me get back to it.
Okay.
All right, yes. So 7D is simply approving the disbursement of the special assessments in compliance with the ordinance. That is as required by the ordinance in here.
Okay. And let me restate my questions
Yes,
now that we're on the same item.
All right,
The last week when we discussed this, the language had to do with the city treasurer collecting the fees.
Correct.
And I requested the language be changed to disbursement. I just want to make sure it's throughout the entire resolution.
yes, sir, both
All right.
sections on here.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
disbursement
Appreciate it.
only. Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Burrs?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Councilman Smith, I also think, I have a note here that you didn't want to say approving, you wanted to say acknowledging the disbursement. Is approving okay with you?
Mr. City Attorney, what's actually in there?
It does have the language approving the disbursement on here. If you want to say acknowledging the disbursement, we can change the version for this evening.
Councilman, that's what you said last week. You wanted the word acknowledgement.
Yes, please, you have the mic.
Thank you, Councilwoman. You were 100% correct. I actually glossed over that part and went straight to the disbursement piece. I did want it acknowledged. The approval is actually part of the ordinance. We should not need to reapprove anything that is already codified. So acknowledging would definitely be a preferred language. Thank you, Councilwoman. I totally missed that.
And we will make that change for this evening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope you're right. I just want to make sure that the law does not require us to approve yearly.
That the next time that this comes before you, you will have to review at that point in time the budget that has been submitted by the CBID group. At this point in time, you're merely acknowledging the disbursement of monies by the city treasurer out of the funds that have been collected pursuant to your ordinance. So I believe you're okay on this section. You do have to review the budget that occurs from the group for the next year.
All right, but do we never have to approve?
If you increase or you change that amount, you would have to do that by ordinance, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And theoretically, the reason that we're given this power on a yearly basis, but we can disapprove
Yes, sir.
and change something.
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. Councilwoman Burrs?
Thank you, sir. Again, I think that we need to review that whole ordinance. And the reason for that is there were some misconceptions, like the word approve throughout as opposed to acknowledge. You're saying that, again, we were only supposed to be collecting the money because a government agency has to collect the money and then disperse the money. I'm still trying to figure out why there's still language that implies that we're approving or changing or anything like that, unless you're just referring, and I think there's still some old words in the ordinance, unless you're just referring to approving just that piece. The only thing we're supposed to be approving is the city treasurer, the city finance officer accommodating a collection modality and then dispersing it.
Your current ordinance under 11.532 says that the bid board shall annually submit to the council a financial statement which shall be reviewed and approved by the city
Yeah,
council.
I know.
So
It's-
that's what's in the current ordinance. I mean,
I know.
yes, sir.
And I think that was never the intent. So do you think that's a time, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think what needs to happen is that we review this. We don't have to wait a year to do it. If we're accommodating the bid board by collecting the fees and then dispersing them, it's my understanding that was the intent of the council from the very beginning. I sure will stand corrected if my colleagues thought differently. If so, then we should not be approving. We can acknowledge something, as my colleague said. I don't see where we should be approving anything. So I request that we review this, or the economic development can review it. I think that they should be free to do what they need to do, and we are merely an accommodation. If somebody thinks I've got that wrong, say so, but I believe that was the intent.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing is we need to make sure that whatever is in the document is not approval. That's it, nothing
Well,
nothing
things
else,
keep
right?
popping up, sir, that was not our intent.
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm not saying that the city attorney did it wrong. What I'm saying is perhaps there were some changes or some things we assumed that were incorrect. At any rate, if I believe I'm correct in saying our initial intent was to be an accommodation to collect the fees because the state law required it. That's it.
Sure. Okay, then we will review that to make sure that it reflects the intent that this council has. So we'll get together, economic development, and bring something back for the council to review to make sure that everything is in order.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Burrs. Okay, seeing no other lights, let's move on to Resolution for Human Resources 7E.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Human Resource Officer to renew an existing agreement with Russ Blakely and Associates LLC to provide benefit advisor and open enrollment services and act as an agent of record for all benefit options at no cost, the second of two optional renewal terms beginning April 1, 2020.
Let's move on now to 7F.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Human Resource Officer to renew an existing agreement with CompSite Corporation to provide employee assistant program services to eligible city employees at the rate of $1.15 per employee per month for non-sworn employees and $1.49 per employee per month for sworn employees for the second of two optional renewal terms beginning April 1, 2020 for an approximate annual cost of $40,000.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The following items for resolutions, 7G, H, I, J, and K, has already been read into record. With that being said, we will now move on to Youth and Family Development, item L.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Development to renew a blanket purchase agreement with the Electric Power Board to pay client services payment for the citizens of Chattanooga that qualify for assistance under the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program and the Community Service Block Grant programs for a grant period of October 1, 2019 through September 30, 2020 without additional funding.
Councilwoman Coonrod. Okay, well, let's get this matter out the way, and then we'll address the issue. It's not related to this item here, right? No. Okay, we'll move back to that. So, Councilman Byrd, I see your light.
Thank you, sir. It's the same thing. I have a question about something that we passed up in economic and community development,
Wait a minute.
but we'll address
Wait a
it
minute.
later.
Is it related to this item?
Not to this item.
Okay, we will address that. I see no other questions related to this particular item. We will move on now to Resolution 7M, and then we will circle back to Councilwoman Coonrod and Councilman Byrd. So, Madam Clerk, please read in.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Development to renew a blanket purchase agreement with Atlanta Gas Light Company to pay client services payment for the citizens of Chattanooga that qualify for assistance under the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program and the Community Service Block Grant Programs for a grant period of October 1, 2019 through September 30, 2020 without additional funding.
Okay. I see no lights. So, Councilwoman Coonrod, would you please hit your light? Okay.
It's mine.
Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm still really left with more answers than before on number 9 on D, under finance. We
Okay.
can go back to that. Phil, if you could send me, just so I can further research it, the ordinance, and then when the bid from the state of why we had to, 'cause it came back in front of us for the city to approve. To my understanding, we didn't have to if we didn't agree with it. But 7 of us clearly agreed with the process of us collecting the money and making sure that it get dispersed to them.
Okay.
We didn't have to, is how I understood it to be, and I'm really confused, or 5 of us did. I'm really confused about why we really keep going back and rehashing it when we already know what we done. It was a whole big deal about it, even if we said no at first and then it came back, it was approved. So could you resend me the ordinance about it, and also what the state said about it, and the discussion around before we even voted to get to that point? Because what I'm seeing here from our council is that every time we feel as if, oh, we may get a nudge about something that we should not have done, we forget about what we did. And that is becoming a norm on our council. When we clearly are voting for these things, and now we're going back to say, why did we even vote in that manner? We know why we vote. You voted for it. So I think it's a waste of our time, really. And either we gonna take it back and say we're no longer gonna do it, but I'm not understanding what's the point of us continuing to discuss it, and we've already agreed to use this process.
Sure.
So if you would please give me that information. I don't wanna wait till economic development do a session with us about it so I can further research it, because this trend just keeps happening.
Okay, I'll get you copies of the ordinance and the TCA provisions and the minutes.
And maybe we need to see who all voted for it. Maybe that could spark some memory.
Okay. Is that it, Councilwoman Kumar? All right, thank you. We'll see that you get that information. Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. When we reviewed 7C under economic and community development about the Tubman site.
Yes.
Reading, I didn't recall definitely being read into record or even the discussion. I was wondering if Sharita could come up and for the record, 'cause I've received several emails about this, and just for the record, to show us what's going on 7C.
Good afternoon, council. The item is to move the property line 20 feet. As we started working on the sewer relocation project, we discovered there is a railroad easement. Adjacent to the railroad easement, there is an electric power board utility easement.
Yes, ma'am.
Which meant that we were not able to put the sewer into either of those easements. In order to put the sewer in, to make the development happen, we then had to put the sewer onto the property which we donated to Nippon. So essentially, we donated a certain number of acres, and because we put the sewer within their property boundaries, There's also a permanent sewer easement that's roughly 20 feet, so 10 feet on either side of the center line of the sewer. You're not able to put any physical structures, which essentially meant we donated property onto which they could not put any buildings. In order for them to maintain the footprint of the building that they were sketching out,
Yes, ma'am.
we asked them for a sketch, and when they started putting it together, that's when they discovered that in order to make everything happen, they had to shift over the entire development, roughly 20 feet. Their engineers initially wanted 50 feet. Our engineering team, negotiated down to 20 for them so that we could preserve the additional acreage onto which we plan to develop. So we settled at the 20 feet, and so that's essentially what we're doing. We're donating a 20-foot sliver, the length of the property, which will then extend their boundary line. So the property we donated has our sewer in it, and then they're shifting their development over, and they needed 20 feet in order to make that happen.
Thank
And
you so
that,
much.
that enables them to maintain the same capital investment, the same building designs, the same job creation, all those other things that were written into the donation agreement.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
You good? Okay, we have Councilman Ledford, and then we also followed by Councilman Smith. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
So Sharita, without this donation, then we move back to a problem with the sewer location, which was originally along the streets, which cost a tremendous amount more than this current plan, which is running diagonal.
That
Or
is
the current
correct.
one's diagonal, sorry.
That is correct. There's roughly an additional 1.7 million, 2 million.
Yeah.
To put the sewer in the street, but that also adds another 18 months to the project.
Correct.
So our option was to put it within the boundaries of the property that was donated.
Physically, this is the best option.
Best option, and the company was willing to work with us on that.
Very
Because
good.
essentially, we donated property and then had to go back and ask permission to put a sewer into property that no
Sure.
longer belonged to us.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's not healthy.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just curious, Sharita, and it didn't dawn on me before, extending this, or, donating an additional 20 feet on the other side, the other 20 feet that we have encroached upon that we donated to them, does that remain theirs, or are we just shifting what we donated or redrawing the parcel so that where the sewer line is still or reverts back to city property and we just give them 20 on the other side?
No, that's a very good question, and so that property they still will own that property. They are able to develop, they can put roadway on it. They can pave over a portion of it. They simply are not able to put buildings on it. And then when it comes to putting buildings in the required setback, they have to adhere to the 20-foot permanent easement and an additional setback. So, yes, they're able to put pavement, roadways, their truck turnaround
Okay.
court can go through it. So, yes, there is some development. They simply are not able to put structures on it, which is why they still maintain that. We did not claw that back.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I was just curious if it wasn't usable, that eventually when it hits the tax records, they're paying for something we told them they can't use, and I was just wondering how that would function. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Smith. I see no other questions. So now we will close this part of our agenda. We got Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this was the time you want me to bring up about the legislation.
We're getting ready to get to that.
Okay. Or you wait after this.
Yeah, we're gonna do that then, yeah. We're closing this part of the agenda session. Now we will move into the departmental report from IT.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I have a very brief 75-slide presentation for you, as per my norm. So actually, it's real quick. I wanted to give you just a quick update, since we don't have any other major things going on right now that it would take up a whole lot of your time. I wanted to tell you a little bit about that Dell contract you just recently approved and what that's going to do for us and how it's going to save some money. Next slide, please. So first of all, over the last couple of years, we've managed to save the city a little over $1.3 million a year, not once, a year, ongoing. So we're continuously trying to do that. And one of the ways that we're doing that is with this new contract with Dell. We can save upwards of $250 to $300 a machine by moving from our Lenovo stuff to our Dell stuff. They're more powerful, they're lighter, they're more easy to carry around. And it also, so that cost savings adds up to about $60,000 a year when it comes to standard deployments. It also gives us a little bit of additional time factor. It frees my staff up because Dell actually at no cost to us, no additional cost to us, actually will do the imaging for the machines prior to them actually even showing up to our doorstep. So we get machines that are ready to deploy with very little configuring on our end, rather than having to go through, take a machine out of a box, image it, create that, put all the software on it, stuff like that. So there are a few off cases where we will have to do specialized stuff, but for the most part, our standard image comes pre-configured, which is a good thing. And then, of course, the best part for you guys and for everybody else is we get a great employee discount program. You can go buy one of these computers at a reasonable discounted cost. So it's going to do a lot for us, and that's my presentation.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Council,
I'll pass
please
right
feel
there.
free not to say anything, okay? Okay, thank you for your presentation. We are now adjourned for this part. I will now turn the chair over to our legislative committee chair and Mr. Vice Chair Henderson. You're welcome, sir.
You'd have lost money. So I guess we will call to order the legislative committee, and assuming we have some notes from, or minutes from our last meeting, I guess I'll ask for approval of the minutes.
Second.
With no objections, they'll stand as read. So last week, I did say that I was going to send out some recommendations for our strategic planning that would also involve our agenda session. And I'm assuming that everybody received those recommendations. I'll go over them briefly. One, that strategic planning meeting would be held twice a month on the first and third Tuesdays of each month. We would start strategic planning meeting at 2 p.m. and agenda session at 3:30 p.m. And then that the strategic planning agenda reflect the purpose of creating legislation and achieving goals and objectives of the council. One thing I did not put in that I would like to point out is during our agenda session, that our agenda would reflect the 2-week agenda as well, so that when we're going over our agenda for the current week, the following week would also be on our agenda in the agenda session. Since I made that recommendation, there was another recommendation or option made, and that would be that we would meet weekly for strategic planning, but it would start at 3 o'clock, and our agenda session would start at 4 o'clock. That was a recommendation made by one of the council members. But my recommendation stands as what I emailed you, that we would meet twice a month on the first and third Tuesdays of each month. And I put in here sort of the intent and what, trying to justify the recommendations. One, I think by creating, this sort of creates a cavity of time during our second and fourth weeks for either constituent meetings or for special called ad hoc committee meetings like Councilman Ledford is having, I think, the 24th. That could be in that time slot as well. So my recommendation is the twice a month, that strategic planning start at 2, our agenda session start at 3:30, and that the agenda for strategic planning would only cover and reflect the purpose of creating legislation and achieving the goals and objectives of the council. So, Mr. Chair, that's my recommendation to this council. I'm assuming that, and there were some comments made that we might want to try that kind of on a trial basis before we actually codify it into our council rules and regulations. I think that would probably be a good idea. So at this time, I guess we would just entertain any comments or motions to take one of the other options. And we'll go to Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Small point, very small point, but I think we actually have a couple of months a year where we will have 5 Tuesdays. And so how do we cover that 5th Tuesday for those couple of months a year?
We could either take it as if we need it, or we could just strictly adhere to the first and third Tuesdays of the month.
Okay, but going over agendas, we'd have the 3rd and 4th, or maybe I'm saying this wrong, but if we have it the 1st, we're going over the 1st and 2nd. Having it the 3rd, we're going over the 3rd and 4th. We would never go over the 5th. And again, it only happens, I think, twice a year, so it's not a large point.
Well,
but-
and we can always have a special called strategic planning meeting. I don't think, and maybe we reflect that in this new ordinance. It could be twice a month or as called.
Okay,
We could reflect that in it so that we could cover that if we needed to.
thank you.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. So I just wanted to thank everybody for the flexibility in thinking about how we work more efficiently at council. I had brought up, today is a good example, it's 3:40, and if we're done with our agenda session, we have a huge amount of time that I think that could be better spent than some of us disperse and come back. So I appreciate the flexibility. I'm really good with whatever the council decides to do. I would recommend, though, that we maybe not set in stone what we're going to do to make sure that it works for our schedule and make sure that we're getting our work done and we're not missing anything. But to kick the tires before we buy the car, so to speak, maybe for a couple rounds, and then see if anything or new ideas might develop. But I do thank everybody for listening to that gap that I think that we have in between agendas. It doesn't happen always. We have some packed days, but generally we're working with about an hour to an hour and a half that I've been able to see. So appreciate everybody's flexibility.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of what your suggestion that we do. I just like to add one small thing, is that when we're having those discussions, or they come and present to us about different things, like maybe we could put that at the 3 o'clock agenda, say, or 3:30 if we're moving to 3:30, because the discussion around the purchasing contracts, like that was a great discussion, but we only had a limited amount of time. And like now we've got all this time until our 6 o'clock meeting, and this would have been the perfect setting to have that discussion in, so our questions could be answered. Now we're having to take another week just to have that same discussion. So that's the only thing that I would add.
Okay, point taken. And I think that's what I was trying to cover in having the agenda reflect the purpose of creating legislation. Yeah, at the strategic planning at 2 p.m. And achieving goals and objectives of the council. Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Definitely agree with, I would say, I guess your motion to put that up.
With the recommendation.
Yeah, your recommendation at this point. I think that's a great idea. Just definitely, we do need to switch some things up and try to move forward with this. So just definitely at this point, where are we and how do we get it started and how do we make that attempt to move forward with it?
Mr. Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that we would need a motion and a second on the floor to accept the recommendations, but not to codify them until a point in time which we feel comfortable that this works. Would that be how you'd see?
Yes,
we could
sir.
modify this?
Well, you actually have the authority in your current council rules to make amendments at each meeting if you choose to do that. But I mean, the provisions in section 3A1, which talk about the strategic planning meeting, will have to be amended eventually here in connection with this. All you need to do is have a motion and a second to follow that procedure here for the next week. if you want
Well,
to do that
I
for
think
next
we
month.
would follow it for the next month.
Yeah,
w-
next month
To
to
see
see
how
where you
that,
are.
yeah, to
Okay.
see how that works, so. If you'd like to make a motion to follow recommendations for the next month before we codify it. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Have a second. All in favor, aye? Any opposed, no? I'm sorry, I just now see your light. Councilman, are you finished? Yes, sir. Okay. Councilwoman Burrs, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I
I thought you'd take,
No
I
problem.
thought you'd take.
I
your
like it,
light off.
as long as we have in there the word you used about able to amend, or that isn't the word you used. Because of Councilman Mitchell's comments about the 5 weeks, we also take off a block of time at holidays. There's also some times when, if we keep it in an agenda session, you got the budget, whatever that, there's got to be some way to say that suspended as needed, or added as
Well,
needed, or
I think I put or as called.
yeah, as long as called is in there,
Okay.
then I think it's fine.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think we got a motion and a second, and we got another, okay, here we go. We're still, okay.
Well,
Councilman Mitchell.
just a definition of what as called mean. I mean, can any council person say, I want to call one, or what does it take to as called?
Well,
Under your current rules, in here, you're supposed to have regular meetings every Tuesday. You normally have agenda session at 3 p.m. and a business meeting at 6 p.m. That's really all you have. And it says special meetings can be called by a majority vote of the council and shall meet your public notice requirements. So it's got to be at least a week in advance if you're going to do that.
And somebody's going to have to make a motion, and it'll be seconded, and then we vote on it.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
you good with that?
I'm good with anything.
Chairman, you're on. Oh, okay.
Yeah, when is this to start? What is the recommendation on starting it? Because we're moving in on our first, huh? I might need to know that, yeah.
Well, this looks like to me the last Tuesday, and interestingly enough, next month is a 5 Tuesday month. Wonder where you got that idea. Since we're talking about doing it for a month, Mr. Chair, I would say we'll start it next month.
Okay,
So
which actually will be next Tuesday.
Which would be next Tuesday.
Okay,
That's correct.
so as a matter of record, it would start on March the 3rd.
And then if we want to meet on the 31st, on the 24th, somebody could make a motion to meet on the 31st, and majority of the council would.
Sure.
Would you hit your light, Councilman? You good, Councilman Mitchell? You good? Okay. Thank you. Councilman Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'm fine starting on the 3rd. However, we already have a change in time for the 3rd. We're starting at 4 o'clock, and we've already changed the
We
timing and
have.
everything for next Tuesday, so we may want to think about how we're going to handle that, sir.
Well, everything backs up 2 hours, correct?
Yep.
So we would back up strategic planning at that point. Instead of starting at 2 o'clock, well, be at 12. Correct? If we're backing everything up 2 hours. That was your request to back everything up, so you come up with it.
I mean, we just may need to wait till the 3rd week to start it.
Started on the 3rd, on the 17th,
On the
and
3rd
and operate
Tuesday
that
instead
for a
of the
month?
first Tuesday, yes, sir.
Okay. Is that in form of amendment then? Because I think we agreed on the, starting it on the 3rd.
I
I'm
don't know that
good
we
with starting
agreed
it on the
when we
17th.
started. I think we just agreed on doing it, so.
Okay. Everybody good with starting it on the 17th then?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
we're going to start on the 17th. We're good with that? Mr. Attorney,
Yes, sir.
did we take a vote?
You did not, but you
That's
might
what I
want
thought.
to.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to go with the recommendation for a month, that we will start on the 17th. And we've got a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. So moved. That closes out this legislative committee. Mr. Chair, do we have any further business?
We do not.
I will, you got a light on? Okay. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. We didn't get to this one item, but I just wanted to bring it to the attention to our council about the NLC Leading Together 2020. As I know, next week, we're kind of probably full and discussing, but just wanted to, something that I most definitely support and would like my colleagues to support it as well. With cities leading together, it's a collaborative effort of all the cities that's around, and we're just asking that our presidential candidates that are running are committing to cities such as ours, like for better infrastructure, improved workforce development, ending homelessness, and ending gun violence. There's a copy of the resolution here. We could, the city attorney, if he could look at it and draft up something for us to be on board with other cities as well. All four of these priorities are an issue here in Chattanooga as well, and I would like to see our council join with other cities as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further business needs to come before this council during this agenda session? Hit your light. Oh, you got it on, okay.
What Councilwoman Coonrod just presented. How do we get this in motion, basically, to?
Are you wanting to adopt a resolution supporting that?
Mhm.
Okay, then it needs to be on your agenda here and go through your process for an agenda as to which week you want to get it on. If you want to do that on for the 17th.
And that would require a co-sponsor?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Got
yeah.
two co-sponsors.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
I got it. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Any further business needs to come before this council? If not, we're adjourned till 6.